just for practical purposes, you're going to want to dishoard your silver around that peak, like as it moves up to that peak and as it falls down from that peak. And then as you use it to, let's say, buy groceries or buy a car or even buy a house, you could, something like that, then you would get a good average of finding that high. And once the end game happens, and once the dollar is no longer a currency, gold is going to find some kind of peak, and then it's going to drop off a little bit and then just hang out at that new plateau.
Hello and welcome back to Market Savvy. In this video, Rafi Farber discuss about gold and silver. According to Rafi Farber, this is a general rule that Rafi Farber applied to silver because we frequently see it during financial crises. There is this massive peak that silver experiences. There have been ones in 1919, 1968, 1980, and 2011, but they don't last long. Therefore, if you imagine that you are an expert market timer and can identify the exact peak and sell it, you won't be haunted by the question of whether you got the best deal or not. For practical purposes, you will want to distribute your silver around that peak, meaning as it rises to that peak and as it falls from that peak, when the endgame occurs and the dollar is no longer a currency, gold will reach some sort of peak and then it will drop off a little bit and then just hang out at that new plateau, which is basically what we saw from 2000 to 2012. Let's say like gold went up. And then as you use it to buy groceries, buy a car, or even buy a house, you could get a good average of finding that high, and lots of things Rafi Farber discuss. So please watch the video to end, and like, share, subscribe our channel, Market Savvy. Thanks.
Oh, by running out of other people's stuff, right? How does communism collapse? Because they run out of other people's stuff to steal. If you understand the logic that inflation is theft, then you can't just inflate forever, because if inflation is theft and the more you inflate, the more you steal, eventually you run out of stuff to steal. So how can the world's economic powerhouse collapse? Well, what makes it an economic powerhouse? If it's because they produce stuff, then they wouldn't collapse because they'd keep producing stuff, and that would be great, right? An economic powerhouse is a nation that understands how to create goods and services at a good price, with good conditions, and distribute it to the world in exchange for their wealth. But what makes America the economic powerhouse of the world since 1971? Well, their ability to inflate. Or not even since 1971, say 1933, or whatever year you want to pick. At some point, America stopped producing things, and the only reason that they're the economic powerhouse of the world is because they have, technically speaking, the best path to stealing other people's stuff, right? Okay, so that makes them look rich, but eventually you run out of that stuff, and then it's gone. So how can the world's reserve currency collapse? By running out of other people's things. And that's about to happen. Right. So this is a rule of thumb that I use that we often see with silver during monetary crises. There's this huge peak. There was one in 1919, there was one in 1968, there was one in 1980, one in 2011, but it doesn't last long. So imagining that you are a perfect market timer and you'll be able to find that exact peak and sell, and you won't be, haunted by, did I get the exact top? Did I not? Blah, blah, blah. So just for practical purposes, you're going to want to dishoard your silver around that peak, like as it moves up to that peak and as it falls down from that peak. And then as you use it to, let's say, buy groceries or buy a car or even buy a house, you could, something like that, then you would get a good average of finding that high. And once the end game happens, and once the dollar is no longer a currency, gold is going to find some kind of peak, and then it's going to drop off a little bit and then just hang out at that new plateau, which is basically what we saw from 2000 to 2012, let's say. Like gold went up and up and up and up and up from 2000, and then it went down a little bit, and then it didn't get below 1045 or whatever the low was, and now it doesn't seem like it's going to get below 1900 again. Maybe it will briefly or something like that, but gold goes up and then it finds a plateau. Silver goes way, way up and then and then falls a lot farther and then finds a much lower plateau. Why is that? Because eventually there's a new gold substitute, and people would rather use that than physical silver because it's easier. So I would say if you're trying to get through the end game with the best monetary metal, through the end game itself, and use money during that crisis, you're going to want silver. But after the end game and after we reestablish some kind of functional monetary system based on gold and silver, either gold or silver or both, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, then gold is going to reassert itself at some level that is not at its high, but not as low, but much closer to it than silver will, because people want to use gold substitutes and they don't want to use silver unless they absolutely have to. So that's why you want basically gold for wealth preservation after the end game and silver for emergency monetary use during the end game, because it would be much more valuable than gold during the crisis.
According to Rafi Farber, if your goal is to use silver to get through the end game and use money during that crisis, then you will want silver. However, after the end game, and after we reestablish some sort of functional monetary system based on gold and silver, either gold or silver or both, Rafi Farber not sure exactly what that will look like. Gold will reassert itself at some level that is not at its peak, not at its lowest, but much closer to it than silver will, because people prefer to use gold substitutes and won't use silver unless absolutely necessary. Because silver will be far more valuable than gold during the crisis, you should essentially use it for emergency monetary purposes during the endgame and gold for wealth preservation afterward. So let's back to the interview.
This is really a mental game. Whatever skills that you have, whether it's growing food or carpentry, you just practice them. I'm not. Some people go full prepper, and if that's you, then do it. But I don't do that. So I have my own little garden in my backyard, and I have some chickens, and maybe that's not enough. Maybe I'll get eaten alive. I don't know. I mean, I can't really prepare for everything. But I would say whatever you love to do with your hands, just practice that. You know, if carpentry is a hobby, build something, and just get used to working with your hands, because even if you're not that great at it, it's probably going to be valuable. So I would say do that, and find a circle of friends that think like you do, that you can call up, or you can drive over or walk over to their house, and just for psychological stability, and find out what skills they have. Most of this is going to have to rely on local community. And in the immediate aftermath, we're only going to be able to be in touch with whoever is in our immediate circles. So make sure that your immediate circle is healthy and together, and go around your neighborhood, knock on doors if you have to, and talk about these things and see where people are. And, bring a notepad with you and write down their skills, what these people can do and where they are. And in the immediate aftermath of the collapse of the dollar, you'll have a nice community to fall back on. But you won't be able to do that in an urban environment. So because there's going to be too much chaos there. So I would say get out of New York, get out of Chicago, get out of LA, and move to a less densely populated area and make friends. That's really the most important thing. Because we're not going to survive this on our own. We're going to survive this in communities. And the bigger your community is, the more stable your community is, and the more I would say that they believe in God, or at least some kind of power above them, that they are not in charge of everything, the better off you'll be. And what I tend to say is that each nation, as this happens, is going to have to fall back on the cultural thought that made them great in the first place. Every country is going to have to go back to its roots. That's the United States, Israel, Europe. What made Europe great was Christianity. What made the United States great was also Christianity. What made Israel great was Judaism. We're all going to have to go back to that, the core values of our core traditions, and make them work again. So find people who at least nominally believe in those things.